Well, hello there. This is me watching a YouTube poll about what build we should have this week. Because at pretty much every time I checked it, it was a three-way draw. And it stayed that way right to the end of the week. So yeah, since y'all couldn't decide between Niss, Wingrave, and Laura, Wingrave would have been another sword and shield tank. We already did Kairos last week, so I decided to go with Niss. Just to get the basic Wayfinders out of the way, and then we'll do Laura later, because I'm actually still sort of playing around with Laura's build. So, join me, and we will hop on into it. Apparently I missed a collectible here. Crazy. Alright, so Niss. This is tricky to play because Niss is one of the characters that for the most part has no way that they can just heal themselves or stand there and eat damage to the face. You can kind of do it later on, but if you want to play Niss, you're definitely going to have to be very active in your playstyle. So starting off, there's this power, which appears to do absolutely nothing, and by itself that's generally true. There are some modifications. But if I head down here and we dodge past a deer, you'll see the deer suddenly gets killed. That's all. Basically all that does. It does also apply to the next move, which is Shadow Dash. So Shadow Dash is this one, which you've probably seen this doing all the time. You dash through an enemy and then it both hits them and there's a clone that follows you and does a second hit as well. It's not terribly hard to understand. Now we've got Niss's other ability here, which is this little dodge, which is an iframe mostly. You can also turn that into an attack, but you don't get the big iframe if you do that. And then her ultimate is the easiest of all the ultimates to explain, because her ultimate just lets her do her shadow dashes. So you dash through the enemy multiple times. Gives you basically an infinite. And yeah, that's the short summary of her abilities. Let's hop a little into the build. So we'll go into abilities. Here you can see Shadow Step, and for us, I've given it piercing, and also it increases your ability power, which just is a big stacking buff, particularly when you start doing the infinite version. It will also give ability power to allies too if you dash past them. So all those Wingraves and such, they're right on top of the enemy that you're dashing through, will get an ability power boost if they have the wherewithal and knowledge to utilize that. This is Umbral Aura. You'll notice I haven't put any real stuff into it because I don't find it to be the best of her abilities. Really, it's kind of slow to buff yourself, and then you have to actually just do a dodge after, and you can't. It's not always practical to utilize your dodge as an offensive tool. So sometimes you just have to dodge. So yeah, I don't find it to be the greatest of uses on that one. Vengeful Shade, this one is fully maxed up because you can see this is basically where a lot of your survivability is. When you do the follow-up, you get the 30% damage reduction off that level 1 pip. When you do the level 3 one, when you dodge out of it, you get half of your Vengeful Shade cooldown back, and if you use the attack, you get a charge for your Shadow Step. This is probably like the best of her abilities to max out, I would say. Glimshot is her ultimate. And yeah, you automatically get Umbral Aura while you're shadow dodging in her ultimate with that level 2 one, making this even less having a point. And then you can just keep dashing around endlessly, and you get 100% piercing off that first one. At level 3 again, I don't find that super useful, Umbral Aura in general, to just have it, because it's hard to deploy effectively. Well, it's just a like passive damage, but I don't go out of my way to invest in it. This passive down here is when she dodges, she gets ability power. Pretty short and simple. You should be dodging a lot of this. So then we have normal innervation orbs, and then we have we're using a greatsword, the Colossus specifically. Now, you could probably use Colossus or you could use Epitaph. I'll show you Epitaph in a second. Colossus, I just wanted to use a greatsword. I like the greatsword moveset a little bit more. And then when you use the ability on the greatsword, which if you're not, you have to beat up enemies to charge the meter, and then you would push whatever is described on it on that sword icon in the bottom left. When you're using the ability on the Colossus, you will just get this buff both to ability power. Yeah, you get ability power on your next ability. Short, simple, to the point. I went with that over a lot. Niss comes with the daggers, and that's this comes with the daggers, and that's a perfectly effective way to use her. But one weakness she had with that was break power, because her abilities can get the ability to go through some guards, but I'd like the break power just for more general use. Because not only does breaking enemies cause them to take more damage and take off the resistance, it stuns them so they can't attack you anymore, which is key. It's also used in a couple of boss fights as a mechanic. So I really like having my break power. The character I do use the dagger on can break with their abilities a lot, which did not win the poll. Came in last. So that's our basics of Niss in a nutshell. Let's dive into the more complicated stuff. So, much like my Kairos guide, I'm not going to tell you exact bits of armor and exact echoes to get, because a lot of this is RNG drops. Some of it requires being vastly at the end game. I couldn't tell you where all the armor drops off the top of my head, and the wiki isn't even completely up to date for where all the armor drops. So rather than try and give you those specifics, we're going to try and give you guidelines, because then you can take your low-level accessories and armor and echoes and try and follow those guidelines until you get up to that kind of end game point, and then you will start basically maxing them out. So for Niss, we want ability power. Ability power is your big one. That's like the source of all your damage, essentially. You're constantly going to be doing those dashes and hitting things with your ability power. It could honestly stand to be maybe even a little higher than I've got there, but keep in mind we do buff it with things like Niss's dodging and the Colossus here. The other one I mentioned is Epitaph. Epitaph's special ability will steal, hits enemies and gives you more ability power. It's technically the more effective one, but I just wanted to go with Greatsword for style points. Alright. Abilities, we went over that already. Talents. Alright. So, most people would like to go up for this one and build a critical hit Niss. I'm, of course, a contrarian, but that's definitely a way you can go. I wanted to get a little more survivability and stuff over here, so you can kind of see we haven't taken a prime node. I don't particularly find the Arcanist prime nodes all that effective. Again, it's my build. Feel free to adjust to taste. Feel free, well, ideally don't call me an idiot, but feel free to offer up your own suggestions in the comments. But yeah, we do have a little bit of crit rate in here when we pick up Innervation Orbs. We lower our cooldowns when we pick up Innervation Orbs. We've got an extra attack slot here for some more damage, essentially. We've got our two big triangles for the ×2s. And then down here, when we pick up Innervation Orbs, we get damage shields as well. If you wanted to get really tanky, you'd go grab this one too. But then you'd have to forfeit this one and possibly this one. So that's the talent tree. And for affinities, here we got, so I've got a rare one where I actually want the level 3 perk. I know, it's crazy. So yeah, we've got Lingering Shadows. More ability power from our passive. Poor forming ability has a better chance to give us our passive. And then our Shadow Step, when we're dashing around hitting people, we're also giving them a debuff that makes them take more and more damage. Our lingering shadows from dodging also gives us weapon power. That's handy in between dodges, or if we happen to get silenced or something like that, to let our Colossus deal a little more damage, which will also help break the enemies. And Orb of Shadows, that's a pretty easy one. Dodging in combat has a chance to spawn an Innervation Orb, which is used to pretty much make dodging will basically build up our magic shields based on that talent tree when we pick up those Innervation Orbs. So yeah, there's a bunch of those. This is the artifacts I'm running right now. You don't really need these. You probably don't even necessarily notice them on this build. I am running the obsidian set, but again, these are guidelines. They're not necessarily hard-coded in. Go for your ability power. Try and have at least 4,000 health as a safety net, would be my advice. You will want 5,000 to 6,000 mag defense, or even a little more if you can get it, just because that will factor into how much of those damage shields you get. Ideally, if you are playing your Nyx to her best, you will not get hit at all, but the damage shields and the health are there as your safety net at the end of the day. In your Echoes, this is Heroicness, so she does have this extra rush slot. You can get Heroicness once you unlock Mythic Hunts about 2/3 of the way or 3/4 of the way through the story. It gives you a little bit of a boost in stats, and it gives you this extra rush echo slot. I'm not going to talk about putting a third rush in here, because that's very specific to the heroic character. That said, I will open up here. If you can get this equilibrium early on, which comes from a puzzle in the repository of knowledge where you have to make all the lights the same color, you'll recognize where it is. It's also going to be in my intermediate player's guide, which should be coming out early next week. But there's a puzzle in the repository of knowledge where there's 2 walls, and you'll see a bunch of lights in the middle, and you have to change them so that they all match the wall. Equilibrium drops in that. Early on, you don't want to get too used to this, because you don't really need it, but early on this will give you a lot of buffer space with your dodges until you can properly get her magic shields and everything, or your health up to par. We do have the Mythic Broodmother Silreth Echo. That gives you, this one is again a safety net. It gives you a damage shield when your guard gets broken. If you wanted a slightly more offensive choice in there, you could do, which one is it? Not Marrow. Marrow's actually not great. You could do one like Terissa the Silence here. You can do the good old Argent Hand, which just drops an ability power grenade on them every time you use your Colossus special ability. Those are a couple options. Over here we got the Dread Legion. Once you get it, this is almost always going to be your best choice for an ability casting Wayfinder who spams the abilities, because every time you when you cast a Wayfinder ability in combat, will give you a buff to ability power every 45 seconds. So you'll just get a 25% ability power buff fairly consistently all through. Potions don't really factor too much into the build. This other one should be an extra hit of ability damage if you got it, which is this one, in Ancients tier. You may have a slightly different prefix on that, depending where you are in the game. And that's pretty much Nyss in a nutshell. So I may or may not throw another. I know there's a very short mythic boss hunt at the start. I might throw another one at the end here or something for you. If you have found this guide useful, please drop a like, and ideally subscribe to the channel if you're not already. Let me know if you're looking to see more Wayfinder guides too. We've done Kairos as a tank last week. We've got Nyss with the Great Sword this week. Most likely next ones up and coming would be Wingrave, Senja, or Laura, but potentially we could do any of them. I might run another poll on Sunday or Monday on the channel. And we will hopefully see you in some future videos. Feel free to check out the rest of the channel. There'll be a playlist for builds and Wayfinder guides in the description here, along with a bunch of other links for Twitch and Patreon and other ways you can support the channel too. And on the channel, if you are just kind of looking into other series, not just Wayfinder, check out the playlist tabs, because I do keep everything pretty organized there, so you can see what's already been done or ongoing on the channel as well. Thanks again for watching. Have a good one, and we will see you next time.